Thank you for joining. I'll quickly review some housekeeping items. Put phones on silent as this webinar is being recorded. Any questions, please type them in the chat function, and they will be answered at the end. The topic today is navigating the ever-changing healthcare landscape. Our presenter is Chris Condeluci, the principal and sole shareholder of CC Law and Policy in Washington, D.C. He has served as Tax and Benefits Counsel to the U.S. Senate Finance Committee and participated in the development of the Affordable Care Act. Just a quick review of HealthSource RI for employers. The exclusive source for offering employers a multi-carrier option, while benefits for the small group market. Our full model allows employees to choose from multi-carriers across multi-metal levels with no eligibility requirements. Our defined contribution allows business owners to control what they spend on their annual healthcare budget. Ease control what they buy. I'm going to turn it over to Chris.
Thank you, and thanks for inviting me to speak today, and thanks for everybody for being here. On a Thursday, it's rainy here in D.C. I think it's raining everywhere on the East Coast, so I think you're probably wet like we are. If not, you're enjoying the day. So again, thanks for having me. What I want to do today is talk about some implications relating to tax reform, as well as then fit to care-related matters and some health-related regulations, in particular, will likely impact brokers, impact the small group market, the individual market, both, in my opinion, positively and negatively. So without further ado, let me just jump in to start with tax reform. So end of last year, as everyone knows, Republicans were successful in passing tax reform legislation. And reform legislation, like it's not like a huge impactor on healthcare and employee benefits, group health plans, as well as then insurance in the individual market, like a huge impact per se, right? There wasn't a lot in tax reform that impacted healthcare. But I make an argument that there was one provision that have a significant impact going forward, and that is what you see in the first bullet here, which was the mandate penalty tax was zeroed out to $0. And what that means, or what that meant, that will mean, because this change, this is zeroing out, effective January 1, 2019. So the individual mandate penalty tax technically is still on the books today with a dollar amount associated with it if you don't obtain coverage. January 1, 2019, that penalty will be $0. And that means that the individual mandate penalty tax is effectively repealed. And before you get bogged down on this, one of the reasons why the provision couldn't get ripped out of the code is because of obscure rules in the Senate that Republicans followed to pass the legislation. So they're like, okay, we can't rip the mandate penalty tax out of the code, but we can zero out the penalty, which effectively has the impact of repeal. So the question is, how is rip of the mandate going to impact premiums? Many have opinions on both sides of the political spectrum, of which I'm not going to get into, but the fact that the penalty is gone is noteworthy, and it certainly will have an impact. The question is to what extent that impact. Next, change in tax reform, which is more of a group health plan type impact. Tax reform included something called CPI, index rate. And it's a slower growing index rate than the consumer price index, with a traditional index rate that is included in the Internal Revenue Code for virtually every tax bit exemption, tax threshold for determining your tax rate, exemptions, standard deductions, etc. was all indexed to Consumer Price Index, which, as many know, is a slow-growing index in and of itself, but increases each year, and why things go up. So the thing in the benefit space to point to is HSA contribution limits. HSA contribution limits, we're impacted by this chain CPI, which is a slower-growing index rate, which was effective, or which is effective January 1, 2018. And their issue, why I mention HSAs, is May of last year, IRS came out with the contribution limits for 2018, saying, hey, your contribution limit for your family, if you have family coverage, contribution to an HSA, it was $900 in May 2017 guidance. Reform happens in December of 2017, is effective 1, 2018, and so IRS recently came out with guidance saying, guess what, guys? Remember we said that the contribution limit is $6,900? Well, now it's only $6,850. So went crazy in the HSA world. Employers, more the large employers, not so much the small employers, got active and actually encouraged Treasury to provide some sort of relief, and they did. So I only focus on CPI and HSA to maybe speak to some of you on the phone that have some small group clients that offer high deductible health plans, and therefore are paired with an HSA. Next here, there's not much else benefit related or again insurance related that happened through tax reform. Most noteworthy change just impacted transit benefits, which none of us are really in the transit benefit game. Yes, maybe you're an administrator out there who's maybe on the phone with us, but I know that that's not the crowd, so to speak. I wanted to mention that. And then the latter part of the slide here, what I did want to emphasize is what not happened in tax reform, because there were a lot of talk about a lot of different changes, and at the end of the day, there were changes that did not happen. In particular, you look at the last sub-bullet, where there was no changes to HSAs, FSAs, and the Cadillac tax, no change to any of the ACA taxes. So that's just at least a noteworthy point. Next. So the question we then ask ourselves is, how's tax reform going to impact behavior, right? The best way I will describe it, behavior going forward. It's companies. Insurance companies are U.S.-based income taxpayers. They typically have a high income tax rate, corporate tax rate. Well, the tax reform brought that down to 21%. So the question is, will carriers pass on those tax savings to consumers? Don't know. We're waiting. Right now we are seeing premium increase requests. They're just proposed. The proposed ones we've seen thus far certainly have not included the tax savings in those premium requests. And, there's a lot of skeptical people and cynical people who would say, hey, the carriers are going to pass it on to the consumer. And that's what we'll likely see. But it's still an important question because it really relates then to the sub-bullet, which is, will insurance commissioners say, look, guys, you have tax savings that you should pass on to consumers, and I know you have this tax savings, and I want you to pass it on to consumers. So maybe the back and forth between insurance commissioners and the carriers that there is some sort of reduction in premium based on tax reform. Not sure, remains to be seen. When it comes to employers, both small and large, the question is many of them have some benefit, especially if you're a smaller employer. Maybe you're a pass-through taxpayer, you're an S-corp, therefore you've got significant benefit from the tax reform depending on your income and what type of service business you are. Will you redeploy that into wages, employee benefits? Stuff that remains to be seen. But we are seeing some evidence that employers are redeploying that capital back into wages, back into employee benefits, and I expect that practice to continue. And for at least health insurance purposes, employers are plussing up contributions for health plans as well as providing additional contribution to an HSA. So next. So to jump in, I want to pivot to healthcare. So, back in 2017, Congress tried to repeal and replace the ACA. They failed, and essentially in the wake of that failure, the president issued an executive order. It was October 11th of 2017. An executive order did three things. It directed the Department of Labor to issue regulations on association health plans, which we're going to talk about. Told HHS to issue regulation on short-term health plans, which we'll talk about, and told the Department of Treasury to issue regs on standalone HRAs. In other words, utilizing HRAs as a funding mechanism to allow employers to give their employees a tax-free contribution per an individual market plan. I'll talk about those too. So those are the three aspects of the executive order. It's important to note that an executive order does not have the force of the law. So when the executive order came out, it does not force law. It did not change law. All the executive order does is it tells the federal departments to change the law. And the federal departments have responded, at least already with regard to proposed regulations in the AHP context, health plan context. I expect the HRA regs to come out. Someone has said the end of June they might come out. I think that's ambitious. We will see them probably late summer. Next. Health plan. So kind of digging into, I guess, healthcare issue and digging into the executive order. In January, Department of Labor, the Department of Labor issued regulations on association health plans. And what these regulations did is more or less expanded or made a particular definition under the law easier to meet. So we see in the first bullet here an explanation of this current definition, this current law definition that met in order to establish an association health plan. And the mission is employers have to be in the same industry, they have to be related, and be located in the same geographic area. So the same state or the same tri-state area. So on its face, this definition in law is somewhat constraining for organizations that want to establish an association health plan and offer coverage, not be constrained by being in the same industry and certainly constrained by geographical limitation. So this administration, Trump administration, recognizing the constraints, we are going to provide flexibility. We're going to modify this definition. And in the same industry, no geographical limitation. So my first sub-bullet, that means that national trade associations, franchisees, companies with cooperative members, they can set up an association health plan, or once these rules are final, an association health plan and offer coverage nationwide or on a regional basis. Those small employer members of those associations that have small employer members are going to likely set up association health plans and offer that coverage across state lines. And why is that important? Because the small group rules under the ACA will no longer apply to the health plan that all employers were getting coverage under, or their employees receiving coverage under. Because association health plan will be treated as a large group plan. They're full-insured or self-insured. So that's arguably a pretty important change. In addition, this definition, going back above, is limited to related employers, employers in the same industry. This administration said, you know what? Local chambers of commerce have a lot of unrelated employers. They're not related, not in the same industry. They've had AHPs before. The previous administration issued guidance essentially adversely affecting what local chambers of commerce were offering, and therefore those plans got blown up. Well, let's bring them back. Allow local chambers of commerce to offer association health plans. And then in this context, they would be large group plans not subject to the certain small group rules under the ACA Essential Health Benefits, Actuary Value, Single Risk Pool, Adjusted Community Rating. But you know, the health plan, so all of the ACA coverage requirements still apply. No annual lifetime limits, no pre-X prohibition. There is pre-X prohibition, no underwriting based on health status for particular participants. So there are current law rules that apply, but this is probably an important change in the law for folks on the phone. Next. Association health plan change, which I think is also significant, is the proposed rules allow self-employed individuals with no employees to participate in an association health plan. Currently, there's a Department of Labor regulation that says sole proprietors, these independent contractors, not participate in an ERISA-covered plan. And that's been problematic for independent contractors because regardless of whether you agree or disagree with this, if you're an independent contractor, you're getting coverage through your spouse, or you're getting coverage in the fully insured individual market. So really the only place you get coverage is the individual market. This administration says, you know what, a lot of sole props independent contractors are in unsubsidized markets. They're in the subsidized individual market, therefore facing the full cost of plans. So why give them another opportunity, give them a better choice that would be lower cost, I don't say better choice, but just a lower costing plan that is comprehensive based on the coverage requirements that I mentioned. And this will, should it be finalized, allow independent contractors into association health plans. You know, this will obviously impact the individual market because you will have people exiting the unsubsidized market. People who are subsidized are not going to shift to an AHP because they're subsidized. Individual market exchange plan, but in association health plan, they're not subsidized. So there's a strong argument that it's in their financial interest to stay in the exchange market, subsidized market. Those who are unsubsidized will move, but that still have an impact on the individual market. There's a single risk pool requirement, as many may know, in the individual market. Now, the rest of the slide here about some other provisions, which I won't go into detail, but there's some non-discrimination protections, and an association health plan can be formed for the sole purpose of offering coverage to, like, Uber drivers who have an association health plan can now offer one. I'll be curious to see whether this provision gets finalized. There's a lot of pushback on it. This Form HP for the sole purpose of health insurance remains to be seen, but it does expand the opportunities for HP formation and especially opportunities for independent contractors. Next. This slide here just talks about some of the state regulation. Association health, the Department of Labor regs, they do nothing, in my opinion, and many other practitioners' opinion, to impact state regulation of insurance. So states will still be able to regulate insurance and will still be able to regulate association health plans in the way they want. There's a catch. Because these will be covered plans, there's a preemption that sometimes comes into play. So there is a question as to whether states will try to characterize these fully insured large group plans, as I mentioned, as small group plans. So all of the ACA rules apply. There's argument that there's an ERISA preemption problem there. So maybe states won't go in that direction, and therefore maybe states won't thwart the rules. Remains to be seen, but I can tell you that the rules definitely do not impact state regulation. On the self-insured side, right now, states can regulate self-insured AHPs because they're a self-insured MEWA, and you may know MEWAs. Each state has their own state MEWA law, and what these has set up is a patchwork set of MEWA laws, and stakeholders have suggested that the patchwork is it's cost prohibitive for AHPs to navigate all of these laws in order to offer self-insured and there's coverage in multiple states. So we don't see self-insured AHPs, but we see fully insured AHPs instead. Next. Brief about term health plans. Essentially, regs are already out in proposed form. We're waiting for them to be finalized. In short, what they do is they just go back to the pre-Obama administration rules, where an association health plan, or excuse me, a short-term health plan can be established and be offered for up to 365 days, as opposed to the current prohibition, which limits health plans to 3 months. So we see those final regs sometime soon, as we will see association health plan regs. Next. I'm going to on this standalone HRAs, because I know this is another thing that's probably important to you guys. So in 2013, the Obama administration issued guidance that basically said you cannot use a standalone HRA to give to your employees for a tax-free purchase of a market plan, and you just can't use standalone HRAs at all unless integrated with a group health plan. Small employers, you may know, are engaging in this practice of giving their employees a tax-free contribution. So the small business community mobilized, asked Congress to overturn the guidance, in which Congress did at the end of 2015. And right now, small employers can offer a tax-free contribution for the individual market plan, but there are a bunch of conditions that forth this legislation that I know just by experience, talking with folks who I helped work on this legislation, as well as these tax rules. There's limited take-up of QSERA arrangement because of the conditions. And an important thing to make with this last part of the slide, so the regs come out from Treasury. Wow, this is a standalone HRA to purchase an individual market plan for employees of any size, not just small employers. And I have been told, at least, that when the proposed regs come out, that there not be the same conditions that we in the QSERA legislation. So same conditions that have been constraining and take up of QSERA likely will not see in these regs. There'll likely be some conditions, but there will be the same number of conditions. Those conditions may not be the ones that are so problematic currently, because administration is hearing from people saying, look, these conditions X, Y, and Z, which I won't get into, are problematic with take-up, and Treasury's taking that to heart. And there, I expect the regs to not include many of the more constraining conditions that we see under QSERA. The standalone regs will also allow standalone HRAs to purchase accepted benefits, indemnity plans, dental, things like that, and possibly even short-term health plans. Standalone HRAs can be for out-of-pocket costs. And then next. Just strategic implications, which really just opens it up to questions. Will AHPs become a viable market? Will their non-ACA compliant plans multiply? And is the ability to use standalone HRAs, to define contribution and adversely impacting the employer-sponsored market? I can answer those questions. No one has questions, but why don't we open it up to questions and from there. Am I hearing that there's probably no questions, or we wait for some?
There's no questions, Chris, so thank you so much. If anyone does have any questions, please us or Chris, we'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
And if you want, Jocelyn, in the 6 or at least 3 minutes before you give your closing remarks for your next session, do you want to address at least the 3 questions above?
Yes. Yes, that's fine.
AHPs will become a viable market. I know that there are national trade associations that are interested in offering association health plan to their small employer members nationwide. And there are associations of independent contractors, like the realtors, to offer coverage to their independent contractors nationwide. I do think that there is a market for it. The question is will it be fully insured or self-insured? I think starting out it's going to be fully insured due to some of the issues with state MEWA laws that this administration could address through a sort of class exemption, which allows insured AHPs to be exempt from some of these state MEWA laws or certain aspects of it, but we won't see that class exemption for another year. So there will be a market. It will have an impact both positively and negatively. Maybe there's opportunities for people on the phone in the brokerage world. Maybe it's a threat because it could have an impact on either the individual market or small group market. Non-AC compliant plans like short-term health plans and what I was doing and what the farm bureaus are doing, do I expect to see those to multiply? Probably not. I mean, states, most of them have farm bureaus, and a lot of them could do what Iowa and Tennessee have done. Maybe red states with farm bureaus, go ahead and do that in the next legislative session. So that possibility. But in many other states that we believe in ACA and want their individual market to actually evolve into a more functional market, I don't see that happening. And just on the standalone HRA side of it, this will likely impact group coverage for smaller employers and mid-sized employers. They're likely ones that have been wanting to get out of the game anyway. But the cool thing is, at least in my opinion, is if they do get out of the game, they are only getting out of the game in the context of sponsoring. They're still getting a chunk of change. So they're still financing health care. They're serving as a financier and pointing to dollars as an employee benefit. And broker, you can just help a small employer enroll their employees in an individual market plan. The commission structure is different. There's more opportunities there. Those are how I see the regulatory changes that I discussed impact what you guys do day to day.
Thank you. Thank you for keeping us informed on what's happening with the ACA. Our webinar will be on June 21st at 12 noon. Our guest speaker will be Patrick O'Malley. He will focus on building your business in the digital age. If you have topics that you want to know more about, please send Jocelyn an email. Her contact information is on the slide. If you'd like to meet in person or is interested in getting certified with HealthSource RI for employers, please contact Frances Stewart. Her information is also. Thank you, and thank you, Chris, for partnering with HealthSource RI for employers.
Thanks. Enjoy the weekend.